all of you to this partnership, ECOSOC Partnership Forum side event. Very, very privileged to have all of you here. Particularly, we're very privileged to have Deputy Ambassador Maria Bazols, Ambassador from the Permanent Representative of Spain. And we have several luminaries in this very, very important aspect, access to water and sanitation. What are the approaches and lessons learned in the global pandemic to protect the most vulnerable and achieve the SDGs here in this situation? As many of you know, that we are primarily focusing on the communities who are discriminated on work and dissent. Who are these communities? Globally, we have more than 260 million people who are survivors of this particular form of discrimination based on work and dissent. According to the UN draft principles and guidelines for the effective elimination of discrimination based on work and dissent, which was done in 2009, discrimination based on work and dissent is any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on inherited status such as caste, including present or ancestral occupation, family, community, or social origin, birthplace, dialect, or it can be accent that has a purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition and enjoyment or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in any of the political, economic, social, cultural, or any field of public life. In 2016, Rita Isaac-Nadai, former UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, identifies major communities in her annual report. The communities who face this discrimination based on work and dissent are found mostly from Asia, Africa, and Europe, namely in several of these countries: Bangladesh, Japan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Yemen from Asia and Middle East, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Mauritania, Madagascar, Mali, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Somalia from Africa, and also several other communities who are Roma, Sinti, Gypsy across Europe, and communities like Quilombolas in Brazil. And there are many others who is yet to have been identified in this very, very special particular form, which we are denoting as discrimination based on work and dissent. As you know, Goal 6, which looks at the situation on water and sanitation, also looks at typical forms of specific discrimination, which are preconditioned stigmas that DWD communities in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America, and because of that, are often segregated in remote areas in the villages. In many areas, we have seen, and I too have experienced this, we are restricted to use common water sources and forced to use alternative sources, and many of them are forced to use dirty and polluted water. As you know, many of these communities are also seen as polluted communities across. Roma communities in Europe face a very distinct form of discrimination, and they face significant exclusion from safe drinking water and sanitation. The gap between the Roma and the general population has remained highest in Romania, where 68% of Roma lived without tap water in their dwellings, and this was around 5 years ago in 2016. The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights to Safe Drinking Water and Sanitation, Mr. Leo Heller, said in 2016, throughout several states and regions where safe water and supply and sanitation services are available almost to every household, Roma populations are systematically disadvantaged in their access to services. And where I come from, Asia, this is a particular phenomena that is affecting most of the DWD communities, known as Dalits, across Nepal, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, including the time as I speak, this discrimination and access to water still prevails. And here we are not only looking at access to water, but the whole intersectionality of sanitation and decent job can be seen while forced into what are called as manual scavenging communities. These jobs include cleaning of human excreta and several forms of sanitation work which are forced on the communities who are discriminated on work and descent. And this is a very, very factor that affects communities across South Asia, mostly that is seen, and it has been very clearly identified by many of the UN Special Rapporteurs. And it is in this situation we are meeting specially to see how this particular form of discrimination and access to clean drinking water as well as sanitation can be addressed by the UN Sustainable Development Goals and all these bodies. And in that sense, we are quite happy to have Ambassador Basols from who is the deputy permanent representative based in New York from the Embassy of Spain, to see that how these communities are strengthened through special measures and special frameworks that are addressed to see both at the UN level and as well as at the several of the domestic aspects in each of these countries where they are practiced.
Thank you very much, Paul. I will thank you in English, but for all of you who don't understand Spanish, I do tell you that my remarks will be done in Spanish, and you have interpretation, which has been provided. Muchas gracias, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that kind introduction. And also want to thank the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Descent for having me and let me be a part of this meeting. I recognized all panelists and I'm very happy to be with them, because I come to these meetings not only to give my initial remarks, but also to learn. The only way to learn is to listen to you that have the experience in these topics. I want to welcome the independent expert from Mali, Mr. Tin, that is with us today. We are all in agreement that water is the most valuable resource. Access to drinking water and sanitation, along with the management of each country of water resources and ecosystems, are absolutely essential when talking about human health and the health of people without distinction, and environmental sustainability and economic prosperity. This is such that, in my opinion, it's not possible to have a sustainable development in countries or societies or a durable peace without access to drinking water and sanitation. This is a fact that cannot be denied, cannot be discussed, and it encourages us to think about the lessons that we have learned since the pandemic of COVID-19 began. During the pandemic, our communities had already had to face challenges. It isn't new that there was scarcity and pollution of water even before the pandemic. There were floodings and droughts that we have seen become worse due to the negative impact of the climate change. It isn't a surprise as well that before the pandemic there was an increase of thirst for drinking water in the world. By 2050, the water demand could increase at 30% if the population increases as it is expected of 2 billion people. These numbers make us think, and especially in these times of COVID or post-COVID, where we have been able to see, to experience these health preventions to stop the spread. We have seen the importance of access of water to and sanitation to avoid the spread of the infection. Without a doubt, during COVID-19, water has been a fundamental resource in the fight of governments, local, regional, against the virus. It is true what Paul mentioned. Spain, along with Germany, for many years have fought for human rights to water, to drinking water and sanitation, which are different rights but go along together. Since 2006, these resources are one of the priorities of the Spanish policy. As of 2015, there was an initiative from Spain and Germany, and the General Assembly accepted the resolution 70169 that accepted water and sanitation as separate rights but that are interconnected. These rights permitted a more clear definition of independence of human beings without expressing the relationship between one and another. By separating these rights, we see also that the human right to sanitation becomes more important and steps out of the forgetfulness that we had lived. In 2015, Spain and Germany presented resolutions in succession, not only at the General Assembly, but also at the Council of Human Rights in Geneva. Afterwards, we also presented a last resolution that intended to strengthen these rights. We have kept working in this, which is one of our priorities, even during the pandemic. Spain and Germany have found the importance of water and sanitation in the fight against COVID in the resolution for human rights about this topic, and that has recently been approved by the Third Committee. This approach in this resolution relies on the conviction that human rights to drinking water and sanitation are basic for the full enjoyment of life and all human rights, and that dignify the life of human beings without any adjective, the life of every human being. There are different ways that are interconnected of discrimination, among which we find those related to work and descent. These types of discrimination affect the people that are found in vulnerable situations and cause social exclusion, as well as the loss of dignity, which affect especially and very especially women, which are half of the world's population. For the people that live in these communities, the lack of access to proper services of water and sanitation, including menstrual hygiene for women and children and girls, workplaces, health facilities, and other public facilities make it impossible to fully enjoy these rights, which is especially important in regards to the right to a proper standard of living and to the enjoyment of the highest possible level of mental and physical health. The fight to make it a reality, these rights to water and sanitation, has been reflected in the cooperation of Spain to development, in every program of cooperation for development, and especially in the 5th plan for Spanish cooperation. The most significant example of Spanish cooperation in this sector is, without a doubt, the Cooperation Fund for Water and Sanitation, which was created in 2009. This fund has contributed to make effective the right to water and sanitation in Latin America by causing a movement of 1.5 billion euros in the last 12 years. We are convinced in our country that this right to water and sanitation will contribute to peace, stability, and preventing conflicts. Good examples that this is that way. And we are looking for these two initiatives in which Spain has participated for many years and keeps participating. The first is the strategy for water 5+5 for Western Mediterranean. And the other is the Conference of Ibero-American Directors. These platforms teach and allows an exchange of experiences of water in this regard for those two initiatives. Our commitment to prevention and the fight against poverty and social exclusion to achieve a higher social cohesion and break with the cycle of poverty transmission generation by generation is a firm commitment that keeps going. It's a commitment in which rights to water and sanitation play a vital role. I don't want to finish this introduction to the event without making a wish. That wish is that this event today will not just stay as an opportunity to reflect on the challenges that we are going to face to achieve human rights to water and sanitation in these times of COVID-19. My wish is that all of us become aware that at the UN we are all responsible and we have a joint responsibility in regards to ensure that water and sanitation as intersectional topics for sustainable development will play a central and prioritizing role in the 2030 agenda. Without access to drinking water and without access to water for sanitation, it is impossible to have a sustainable development as well as a enduring peace. Thank you very much.
And I'm very, very happy now to invite Dr. Leontine, who is the independent expert on the situation of human rights in Mali. And I'm very happy also to say, way back in 2000, that is 22 years ago, Dr. Leontine and myself, we had taken this issue in the preparatory conference to the World Conference against racism that had taken place in South Africa at that time. And he was one of those who really fought for the rights of these communities. At that time, he was heading RADO, an organization in Africa, in Senegal, a human rights organization. Since then, Dr. Leontine is the founder of the think tank Africa Jom Center, and he was also the former Amnesty International Regional Director to West and Central Africa. He took office as an UN independent expert on human rights situation in Mali in 2018, and the mandate of independent expert was renewed by the Human Rights Council for several years, and the last one was in March. And so we are very, very privileged and happy that Dr. Leontine is here to bring this situation to the communities of the communities discriminated on work and descent, and forced people who are communities who are forced into slavery even today in several parts of Western Africa and other regions. And I request Dr. Leontine to share and give solidarity and insights into this. Over to you, Doctor.
Merci beaucoup pour avoir invité à.
Thank you very much to invite me. The question of access to sanitation is very important. The communities who are the most discriminated to this access, as we say in French, water is life. Discrimination towards water is discrimination toward the physical integrity of the person, because it provokes diseases, and the people who have no access to water are the poorest. For instance, in the Sahel, where we have very poor communities, and in this context, the person who suffered, who are descendants of slaves, interpreter has some difficulty to understand due to connection. In Senegal and also in Nigeria, we see this question repeat itself again and again, and this question is even more grave because it is aggravated by the situation around climate justice.
Vous avez les plus démunis qui vivent dans les régions les plus difficiles d'accès, qui ont des problèmes d'eau. Donc,
it is the people who live in the places. So the discrimination linked to water and to sanitation, which we suffer gravely from here in all the countries of Sahel, and even in countries like Senegal, where effectively we cannot suspect maybe that the question of discrimination linked to water exists. So it is a question that the UN must take very, very seriously, and the organization of civil society also, and this is why we will never stop congratulating Paul for this exceptional initiative for access to water and sanitation, for it to become universal rights, and that it will not only be promises without actions. So this rapidly is what I wanted to say before we get further into debate. Thank you very much.
I'm very happy now to invite Mr. Javier Sabogal, who represents Acueducto de Bogota, Colombia. As you know, water is a very critical aspect and a very important ministry in Colombia, and we are very happy to have Mr. Javier Sabogal. He's the Director of Environmental Affairs at the Acueducto de Bogota. He has worked at the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, and also for the World Wildlife Fund and the UNDP. Of course, he holds several degrees, especially in environmental economics from the University of Andres, and also master's degree in climate change from the University of East Anglia. We are very privileged also because this particular issue of communities discriminated on work and descent is growing in several countries in Africa, and we look forward to you, Mr. Javier Sabagol, that you will also strengthen our work in identifying and networking with these communities in Colombia and in other countries, so that we can have a stronger communities move against for achieving the rights. So time is yours, and over to you, Mr. Sabagol.
Hello, Paul. Hello, you all, and thank you for your kind introduction. Let me express our gratitude for inviting the company to be part of today's panel on this crucial topic of water and sanitation for the most vulnerable. I would like to say that actually the CEO, Cristina Arango, wanted to be here. She apologized for not being able to assist, but she had to attend other issue of last minute. I would like also to acknowledge and thank Her Excellency Maria Abasols for her introductory remarks, and acknowledge my fellow panelists, experts, and visionaries defending human rights across the globe. It's a special honor to speak on this panel alongside the UN independent expert on Mali, Mr. Tin, and I would like also to thank you, Paul, for being part of this event. I would like to begin saying that within access to water and sanitation, I would like to mention that the Sustainable Development Goals and global significance are significant since their adoption in 2015. The ambition to work toward a sustainable and poverty-free world by 2030 is necessary as a global ambitious unifying force. Goal 6 is of a particular relevance for today's debate, as it seeks to ensure that people have access to clean water and adequate sanitation services worldwide. Goal 6 aims to provide availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Water and sanitation are critical to health of people and the planet. Goal 6 addresses the issues relating to drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene, and the quality and sustainability of water resources worldwide. Improvements in drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene are essential for progress in other areas of development too, such as nutrition, education, health, and gender equality. The Water and Sewage Company of Bogota, which I'm part of, is committed to the UN Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and I would like to provide you with some context about the work that we do. The organization is the sole public water supplier in Colombia's capital city, supplying water to more than 8 million people and nearby municipalities. Most fresh water originates from tropical highlands called páramos, which surround the capital city and captures raindrops from passing fog on their leaves and creates a steady and invaluable supply of fresh drinking water to the country's largest city at an altitude of 2,600 meters above sea. One such area is located in the south of the town called Páramo Sumapaz, one of the most significant páramos in the world, and unique ecosystem with plants and animals found nowhere else in the world, and contributing to Colombia's status as the second most biodiverse country in the world and first per square kilometer. During the pandemic, the national government required utilities companies to devise measures to alleviate the pressure resulting from lockdowns on vulnerable households. Such measures included free reconnection of the aqueduct services to families that had it suspended for non-payment. It is important to highlight that the foregoing does not imply a cancellation of the debt for consumption or that it would not be collected in the future. Additionally, no provider in the country was allowed to apply increases in water and sewage rates. Colombia's tariff framework establishes that operators can increase the tariff they charge the user due to two factors. One, an increase in the price level, and two, a justified increase in operating costs. With this measure, regardless of changes in these variables, the rate remained the same. Finally, during the health emergency, the collection of tariffs for water treatment supplies was suspended, which allowed the continuity of the operation of the systems. The company has established different strategies and tools to improve access to water and sanitation services of the most vulnerable, following national and district level legislation. The first tool is the free minimum vital. The vital minimum is a benefit established through a decree here in Colombia and consists of granting 6 cubic meters of water free of charge for residential users of stratums 1 and 2 of the city. This is the most vulnerable people in the city. The vital minimum has coverage in all localities of Bogotá, but it's concentrated in those that have the largest number of people from lowest strata. The vital minimum granted since 2012 to 121,000 subscribers of Stratum 1 and 500,000 subscribers of Stratum 2 represents 51 million cubic meters per year with a cost for the year 2015 of $50 billion, American dollars. The national sector regulation establishes subsidies for the most vulnerable. In the capital of the country, Bogotá, subsidies are applied in the maximum values recognized in the law. This is why today more than 1.3 million users of Stratum 1, the lowest, 2 and 3 have access to these benefits. Subsidies in Bogotá have reached the maximum ceiling allowed by law. Thus, at present, subsidies for water consumption are destined according to the stratum as follows: 700 for stratum 1, 40%, sorry, 70% for stratum 1, 40% for stratum 2, and 15% for stratum 3. This means that in the case of a stratum 1 user, for every 100 pesos, which is the currency of Colombia, that the district consumes, it recognizes 70 pesos on their bill. In stratum 2, for every 100 pesos, 40 pesos are recognized, and in stratum 3, for every 100 pesos, 15 pesos are recognized. These subsidies are applied by the Bogotá Aqueduct Company in basic consumption, which goes up to 17 cubic meters per month or 34 bi-monthly in both water and sewage services. Finally, the company has established a mechanism to allow informal urban settlements to access water services, reducing risks and water losses by installing provisional service network that bring water to consumers. By implementing these tools and strategies and by conserving strategic water supply areas, the company honors our commitment to achieving SDG number 6, securing water and sanitation access to all, to combating climate change, strengthening local resilience, and even construct peace, as the Excellency Ambassador mentioned, and which is one of the main challenges in a country such as Colombia. So this would be my intervention. Thank you very much for your invitation.
May I request now Ms. Dr. Giovanna Silva, who is the chairperson of CONAC, which is the National Coordination, the National Council for the Coordination of Rural Black Quilombola communities, especially from Brazil, CONAC. She's a dear friend and a leader of these communities, discriminated on work and descent from Brazil, and she's one of the key representatives of several of these people's movements in Brazil. Giovanna is the descendant of women who arrived in Pernambuco backlands back in the 18th century and marked the region's history with their work in cotton production and spinning. She is first among her community to have had access to higher education, and in graduating in arts. She has masters in public policy and education management from the University of Brasilia, with a concentration in the area of race relations. And she fights for national and international visibility in the fight to promote racial equity. We're very proud to have Professor Giovannia Silva, and over to you, Giovannia, for your address here. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, Paul. Boa tarde, bom dia.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, good afternoon to all the countries that are still night and evening. I'm also very happy to again meet you all here. This type of meetings are, I have more than 20 years of history meeting people like you, such an experts like you. And this field is really my expertise, and listen to my colleagues and other experts here in Brazil. We here in Brazil, we are living one of the worst moments in history with a really bad government. Our national politicians are destroying the rights of the discriminated communities here in Brazil. And at the same time, we live a dilemma. From one side, we have communities. For example, the one that I live, that we depend of the water trucks to receive water. So we have drinkable water and cooking water. And on the other hand, we have a lot of communities who just lost everything that they had, their houses, their jobs, their relatives, lives, because there's no water policy in Brazil. In the discriminated areas, in the poor communities, there's no policy. So when there's a big storm and the storms flood all those areas, so it causes a big imbalance in the nature. So the poorest people in Brazil, they pay the price because they were already in a very vulnerable condition. So thinking from this reality is we are in a very complex situation now. Right now, only we are around almost 6,000 people, 6,000 communities, quilombolas communities in Brazil now. The authorities believe that we are way more than 6,000 communities. We are in every region of Brazil, throughout all the states in Brazil. So when we say about water and sanitation, and when we talk about water, public policy regarding water, access to water and sanitation, it's a very strong and powerful issue in Brazil because we have a historical problem with that. So it's a very important issue because the Black people and the discriminated people, they suffer from this for so many years. So it is very important to be here right now in this type of conversation, so we can show abroad that Brazil is not only party, Brazil is not only celebration. We are unfortunately, we are a country who kills Black people. We have high racism here. We have a lot of xenophobia. We have sexism here. We have a lot of inequality, and there are very big, the attacks on the democratic institutions in Brazil are very considerable. So we are fighting here right now in Brazil against that. We are not going to lose faith. We are not going to stop fighting. And at the same time, we are sure that we moved forward for the past 2 decades, and we are on the right path. But right now, we are in a bad place. I would like to summarize by saying something important. Our president, he signed a bill this week, and then he took all of the funding. He took all the fundings which were going to environmental, women policy, indigenous communities, quilombolas communities. So all the money, all the resources, the money have been taken off these communities and all the social programs as well. So the hunger, which is already established in Brazil, is getting bigger because unfortunately we have a genocide person in control. So a person who is a really bad person is leading our country. So we would like to call everybody to make a partnership with us, to join us, because our voice needs to be heard. This, we would like to be an opportunity that we can discuss about this. But we don't want the president of Brazil to transit around Brazil, spreading only good news about Brazil, because the reality here is bad. For example, the president, he's a very racist person. He's against the vaccination, and he keeps defending people not getting vaccinated. So he's against the science. So I'm very emotional. I'm very sorry about that, but I'm so happy that I'm here, that you give me the floor and the voice so I can say what's going on with our communities. Our communities are usually silent. They're muted. And now the only way we have is to go to the courts to search for the minimal rights here in Brazil. So we are already in the courts just to guarantee the vaccines for the quilombola community members. So we guaranteed the access now. So as after this victory, we're not going to stop fighting in the court, judicially, to get all the rights that we are entitled of. So all the policies, they should be in favor of us and not against us. So thank you very much for this forum, for this space here. Thank you for giving me voice. And we would like to just say that we are against the current political scene here in Brazil, which just took our rights from us. So only in the name of money, power, and greed. So we cannot leave Brazil like to be deforested like it is now, to be left on the side right now. So, and who suffers the most are the most vulnerable communities like us, the community quilombolas. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much, Johannes. Thank you very much all for this opportunity.
I now request Mr. Ciprian Valentin Nordis, who is the community's discriminated on work and dissent rights expert from the European grassroots organizations, Roma grassroots organizations network. And Mr. Cipri is an activist from Bistrita, Romania.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul. I hope you can hear me well. Okay,
excellent.
Thank you. Thank you once again for this introduction. And I would like to thank you guys from the Global Forum for allowing me to be part of this event. It's quite an honor to be part of such a panel. And honestly, I'm new in this Global Forum, and I've learned a lot from the speakers before of me. And thank you very much. So I'm from Romania. I'm a Roma, and it's quite an honor and a pleasure for me to speak about my people and some of the issues that they are facing in their daily lives. Now, some words about Roma in general. I'm sure that there are still some people around the world that whenever they hear about Roma, they think about maybe a nice place in Italy. But it's not only about that. We are an ethnic group. We are about 10 to 12 million Roma living in EU countries, according to the European Commission, and some say that we are about 20 million living in Europe, also outside EU. You may know us by the names Gypsy, Tsigan, Zingari, Gitanos, Irish travelers, and so on. But most of them are words with pejorative connotation, and showing the discrimination that we are facing nowadays. But I want to mention that this discrimination didn't appear suddenly out of nowhere, but it has some deeply roots in history. And our history shows us that about 1,000 years ago, when we arrived in Europe, we were seen as different because we had different habits, different language, different culture, and we didn't have the means to defend ourselves, and we were taken as slaves, and this lasted for a long period. For example, in Romania, we had more than 500 years of slavery, and so on. During the Second World War, we also were victims of the Holocaust, and we lost the majority of the Roma population. But we survived and we moved on. Now, during communism, especially in East and Southeast Europe, we were forcibly assimilated, and because of that, we lost a lot of our culture and our historical heritage. But still, we moved on. So what I was trying to emphasize is that the discrimination that we are facing nowadays, it has some deep roots in the history, and one of the ways it is very visible to notice the inequality between Roma and non-Roma is in the field of health, and I want to refer especially to water, to access to water and sanitation. For example, it is very obvious that there is a 10 years difference in life expectancy between Roma and non-Roma. Other surveys say that there is about 26% or even more of Roma that are not covered by national health insurance or any kind of health insurance in general. Now, more than 22% of Roma have a long-standing illness or health problem. And that's a big number, in my opinion. Well, I've been part of the Global Forum of Communities Discriminated on Work and Decent in the last couple of months, and I heard so many interesting stories, and most of them sad, unfortunately, about Chilambos in South America, about Dalits in India, about various people in different parts of Africa, and they are facing some big and very, very important social issues, such as slavery and so on. And I was thinking that maybe we, as Roma living in EU, we are lucky in a way, because we have the EU legislation, we have so many treaties, so many documents, human rights documents, we have the national legislation as well. And I thought that maybe we are lucky and we have a better situation, but things doesn't look so well. Even with all these policy documents, even with all the legislation behind us, we still have a lot of issues regarding our social inclusion. We are still socially marginalized. And when I'm talking about policy documents, to give you an example, we have the EU directive addressing the quality of water intended for human consumption. We have another one which is very interesting, European Pillar of Social Rights, that mentions that everyone has the right to access essential services of good quality, including water. But still, according to a study which is called EU Second MIDI Survey, and this is very important, 1 in every 3 Roma live in housing without safe water supply and sanitation. So still there is a big distance between Roma and non-Roma. To give you just an example, one community where I used to work and that I know very well, it's called Patarât. It's here in the northwest part of Romania. It's in the outskirts of a very big city, a developing city. we have here about 2,000 Roma who live nearby or even on the trash dump of the city. Now, you can imagine they live in inhuman conditions. Most of them have no access to utilities, even no access to drinkable water. And the pollution there is very high. I'm talking about air, soil, and water pollution as well. They live in improvised shelters made out of collected materials that are collected from the landfill. And what is very interesting about this community is that most of them have been forcibly evicted and then relocated in that area by the local authorities. So you cannot expect that happening into an EU member state, but still, this is real and it's happening. I would like to draw some conclusions. The historically rooted discrimination against Roma is still affecting nowadays livelihood of many Roma. The access to water and sanitation is one of the main issues showing the health inequalities between Roma and non-Roma. And last but not least, the lack of access to water, in my opinion, to water and sanitation is part of the bigger phenomenon which is called environmental racism, and it's affecting many Roma communities, not only in Romania, but also in other parts of the Balkans and even in other parts of the world. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Now we're coming to the last but not the least. The speaker, Ms. Bina Palikal, who's the General Secretary of the National Campaign for Dalit Human Rights.
Thank you, Paul, and to all my co-panelists who've really brought in the situation of water and sanitation in their respective communities. I will be speaking mostly on Dalits who are part of the communities discriminated by on work and descent. Dalits mostly form our communities discriminated on the basis of caste in the South Asian region or the South Asian part of the world. They are the majority of victims facing this, which is known as structural discrimination, which leads to marginalization, social and economic exclusion, and limited access to basic services, including water and sanitation. Being the lowest in the caste hierarchy, Dalit women within this community often form the poorest section of society and has suffered a long historical and social exclusion. They do not have safe drinking water and sanitation, and this has been a major challenge. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Bina.
Please go ahead. A little internet, but I think please continue.
Okay. Safe access to safe drinking water and sanitation has been a major challenge. Most of the practices of untouchability that the Dalit communities face is around access to water and sanitation. So when women go to get water from the well, they are prohibited to get water, or nowadays they have common taps or common sources of water, which is very difficult for them. So actually these practices are around access to water. One of the other challenges is that many of these sources of water and sanitation are in the dominant areas of the villages or towns. So for accessing the infrastructure is placed elsewhere and not in where the Dalits are living. So again, access to that infrastructure then becomes a challenge in itself. A lot of violence and atrocities are built around, happen around access to water and sanitation in this part of the region. How so? Again, when women go out to fetch water, go out for defecation in the open defecation areas are there in several parts of this region. When they go to access this, there is often either a backlash violence or a settling of scores between communities, or even the fact that because Dalits are formally the untouchables, cannot touch or pollute, and therefore referring to the whole purity and pollution in this regard. I will not. I'll speak as short as possible because I know time is a problem. According to the census of India, there's about 16.16% of the population of India come from the Dalit community. In Nepal, it's about 1.8 million Dalit women, and in Pakistan, there's about 330,000, and also likewise in Bangladesh and in Sri Lanka. Most of the women within these communities face, of course, further marginalization, but also a traditional practice of social boycott because women come from these particular communities and in turn lead to violence. But what are we talking about? I don't really want to speak about what is the issue or what is the problem that we have. We do know that in some of these areas, even recognizing that there are communities discriminated by work and descent called Dalits, even naming them as that is a problem in some parts of the world, like Bangladesh and maybe even Sri Lanka. Nepal and India have some, Pakistan do recognize and have some laws regarding that. So I will come quickly to what are we talking about in the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. I will just go to two targets that we're looking at. One of the target is that safe and clean drinking water, and the other, I think it's 6.1 is universal and equitable access to water and affordable drinking water, and the next one is adequate equitable hygiene for all, where we are looking at needs of girls and women. I know that I'm running out of time, so I'll just say that without keeping the principle of non-discrimination and inclusivity and equitability in our larger framework, I don't think we'll be able to provide clean drinking water and safe sanitation for the communities discriminated on work and descent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beena Palikal, for a very informative sharing on the situation. And you have said it is not just the issue of water, but it is so much interconnected with several. I think all those who have come from who've experienced from the communities have said that, it is a greater part of the environmental racism that is taking place, greater part of the human rights violations that are taking place, of being also affected by access to broader resources, and a type of governance which is not allowing us to enjoy equitable access to safe drinking water, nor are they able to provide specific focused sanitation to all, especially women and girl children and others who need it.